Hey everybody, what's up? It's your friend James Shaw. Trust you're doing okay, and all is well with you. I'm excited because we have moved from the speed market to a skill market. No longer is it how quickly can you get someone in the door and write the contract and get your sign in the yard and all that kind of stuff and just make money. Now your skill set is totally exposed, and you're probably hearing some objections right now that you hadn't heard in 2021 and early parts of 2022. So I've got two of the best agents on the planet to help us walk through how we make sure we can overcome those objections. What are some of the common ones? And then how do we get better at it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, we're going to have them introduce themselves. Scott, we'll start with you. Tell us who you are, where you're from.
How you doing? My name is Scott Malouff from San Antonio, Texas. I've been with Keller Williams now for 7 years. And last year, our team was able to help serve 531 families and looking to continue to push through.
Yeah, so you definitely have to overcome objections if you're going to help that many people. And I'm excited to have you on. Brendan, tell us who you are.
Yeah, so Brendan Bartic, the Denver, Colorado Front Range area. Our company and our team is Elite Home Partners. I'm also the OP operating principal of Keller Williams Integrity here in beautiful Cherry Creek. And my passion is helping agents reach their goals and exceed their goals. So I love today's subject because I always tell everyone we get paid an enormous amount of money to talk. So if we don't practice and know those skills, then how can we make all that ridiculous money?
Yeah, no doubt. And so we're going to practice what to say and how to respond and how to overcome objections today. Scott, I'll start with you. What are some of the common objections you're hearing right now? It's a little bit different than a year ago.
Yeah. So a little bit like with the listing side, we're having to do price changes because we haven't done price changes in a couple of years. So having those conversations, going back to what their goals are, why they're selling a home, or even on the buy side, why they're buying a home. So, with rates going higher than we've seen in the last, 3 to 4 years, those kind of conversations as well, just talking to people about historic lows and average where we are today. So, being able to isolate the issues and then go into what we need to do for the solution for people to be able to either sell their home and get to the next season of their life, or buy the home and understand, down the road, if they would think about refi, they can refi, or just, maybe finding it where there's other wins inside of buying a home today where they can put closing costs and they can get a home a little bit less than where they were, a year ago. A year ago, people were paying 10, 20,000 over asking price. And now you can get, 10,000 under asking price plus closing costs paid for. So those are things that, being able to educate your buyers and also educate the sellers to be able to just understand what the importance is. We always go back to Ford, family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. When we know their dreams, when we know their goals, that is something we do a lot with pain versus pleasure, and just taking their goals away and then repainting that picture for them. So that's something we do a lot with this market.
I like it. Okay, so pricing and then kind of buyer motivation due to interest rates is what you're hearing. Brendan, would you agree with that, and what would you add?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the biggest change is now that we have to become masters of financing. It used to be, hey, here, talk to my lender. He or she is great. Now, if you're not able to understand the leverage that you need to provide in regards to financing 2-1 buy downs and all these different programs, 3-2-1 buy downs, then you have people just sitting on the fence. And so in trying to create that buyer motivation, we're just trying to get them into the common practice of understanding that you still want to buy a home. You're still making someone rich by renting. That doesn't make any sense. And regardless, you can always refi in the future. This isn't, you're not locked into this rate for the rest of your life. So education, I think, has become the biggest tool that we have. And then on the seller side, we have to create buyer urgency. So in the recent markets, everything was just flooded. Now we're going, okay, how do we get buyer urgency to come to the property and the seller to understand, like Scott said, from what we were talking about earlier with pricing conversations. We have to create a whole different conversation when it comes in regards to pricing to make sure that we're putting them in a position to create a buyer frenzy. And that we haven't had to do in a while.
All right, well, then let's chunk it down. I want to start with buyers and talk some specifics around buyers first. And Brendan, you brought up having some understanding of financing. I did a session with Laura Lynn Ball from Keller Mortgage that you can watch at jamesdshaw.com or in the Pivot Shift Ahead Facebook group. And she said that. She said, you have to have more understanding about financing now than you've had in the past. You're not a lender, but you got to have some understanding so you can walk people through. So let's go through the common buyer objections and maybe how you're overcoming them. So Scott, I'll start with you. You said interest rates are a biggie. How are you helping buyers get the perspective they need about interest rates? Because Gary says our job is to provide perspective to potential buyers and sellers. So how are you doing that?
It goes back to what Brendan was saying too. So, going over, say they're renting a home and say they're paying $2,000 a month. At the end of that year, that's $24,000 that they'll never get back. So, going back to $24,000 that you just threw away, you could just put that $24,000 into a trash can, light it on fire, because you'll never get that money back in any type of equity, yet you just helped somebody else build equity. The best investment on earth is earth, and be able to invest in earth, no matter what the rate is, you're going to be able to get it back in the long run. So this might not be your forever home, and it might be a forever home. We can refi it in the future, yet say you just stay in this home for the next 5 years and then we turn it into a rental. At the end of the day, this property right now is going to be able to build you wealth. Instead, you're going to be building somebody else's wealth if you don't take this move today. So let's take this step today to be able to get you out of a rental property and become a homeowner. And then that's kind of where we push it to.
I like it. The best investment on earth is earth. That's a great line. Let's get that on a shirt. And then the forever home conversation. I've heard multiple people say we have got to get people off of this idea that they're going to find their forever home. There's too much HGTV going on, and we're not looking for our forever home. We're looking for our place we're going to live for the next 5 to 10 years and then leverage that to do the next thing. Scott, how are you educating people or changing their perspective from going from the forever home to the right now home?
It comes back down to building wealth. If your goal is to build wealth, the most millionaires in this world became wealthy through real estate, and being able to understand that moving every 5 to 7 years is a good thing. And if you buy a home now and then another 5 years you bought another home, and we continue to build your portfolio, in 30 years you're going to have 6 or 7 homes that you can say, hey, this is my portfolio that I can now look to sell, and it's another retirement plan on top of anything else that you're doing. So it's a great strategy when you talk about building wealth and being able to utilize different, like they were saying earlier, about understanding different loan programs, and because you're moving into another homestead and being able to have a rental agreement for the house before you sell it. Like, there's a lot of options you can do that are going to be able to help you be a stronger buyer with a less of a down payment sometimes than you would if you were just to say, I'm buying an investment property, I'm going to put 20% down. I know that helps with the insurance and everything. Yet, if you're able to, just say if they didn't have the means to put 20% down and they're buying another homestead, then they can do a conventional 5% down and be able to rent out the property they were previously in that they might have bought with an FHA loan or something like that.
Brendan, this goes to what you were talking about, is understanding some basic financing stuff. So what would you add then about walking our buyers through today's market? What would you add?
Yeah, well, Scott took all my good stuff. So well done, Scott. But it's fascinating. What we've really looked at, James, is going back to buyer motivation. So before we were just like, you're lucky if you get a home. Now we have to make sure that when we're doing our needs analysis, we have what we call a buyer profile with our process. And so we make sure that we're really tapping into finding out exactly why it is that you want to buy. Is it you want a backyard for the dog? You want to be close to a certain school? You want to be close to the mountains for skiing? What is it that you want? And then our ability to constantly remind them of that's the reason that they're purchasing as well, instead of just, yes, it is, of course, to build wealth, but there's something inside. We know all buyers make decisions based upon emotion and not logic, right? But the majority of them make that emotional buy. So let's tap into that. Let's find out what it is that they really love, and then let's go to work on finding it for them. And what we're using right now is our buyer profiles to get listings. Because once we build that buyer story, we go, Susie, is a nurse, and she really wants to be in a certain neighborhood, and her husband just got back from overseas or whatever it is. We tell that story when we're making we have a buyer call or circle of influence calls, and we're leveraging that to get off-market properties and get some of these sellers off the fence so we can double dip.
It's like the old Tony DeCello letter that we taught in Bold Forever, right? I'm working with the
Always.
following buyers. Sally and Joe are looking for this kind of house in this part of town at this price. Who do you know that has a home that would work for one of my buyers? You leverage your buyers to get more listings, which is really smart.
People helping people. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah. So, okay, motivation's important. The motivation a year ago, if we rewind and go to the first 3 months of 2022, was we just need a house, we'll pay whatever it takes. That's not really a motivation. So agents may have just simply forgotten how to truly get to a buyer's motivation. So Brendan, what are you asking? What are the questions that you'd recommend somebody ask to truly understand why a buyer is buying today?
Yeah, so some of my favorite questions are simple, James. What's important to you about owning a home, right? If you could paint the perfect picture for me, right, today, you could paint the perfect picture of what you're looking for in a home and a neighborhood and a lifestyle. What does that look like, right? Is it walkability that you're looking for? Are you looking for hiking trails? I mean, obviously it depends on where you live, but obviously, we're in a very active area. So we're always constantly just trying to figure out, do you need to be close to the airport? Do you travel a lot? What are those things? And what I've been challenging my entire organization to do is stay on the phone as long as possible and treat the buyer like you're trying to build a friendship. I think sometimes, and I know maybe Scott and some of us others are with Zillow Flex, and we've got these big programs that we're working, and they're like ALM, appointment, location, motivation, right? Like bam, 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 bam. And yes, I truly believe that helps conversion. But after you set the appointment and you go through that, when you talk about motivation, it's not only motivation in can they buy, when are they going to buy, but do I care about them? And I talk a lot about this in building trust with the buyer. If I'm in a relationship with someone, there's trust. They know that I care about them. They know that regardless of how long this takes, I'm going to be there for them. And I think sometimes some of the way that we were taught is, can you buy a house? Are you pre-qualified? And can you look and buy in the next 90 days or 60 days or 30 days? And if you can't, get out of my life. We're building an entire funnel because we know the average days on market for any buyer conversion is 550 days, at least here in the Front Range. So I don't know if somebody's going to buy in 30 days or 6 years. I just know I need to become in relationship with them. I need to have a friendship with them, and they're going to get me referrals along the way. So many times we've worked with $100,000 leads that have come in with a 21-year-old condo buyer that refers their mom to us to sell their $1.5 million home.
Yeah.
So it's just about going deeper.
Well,
right?
And you've got to eat in 30 days and you've got to eat in 6 years. So you might as well keep building the pipeline. So I like it. Okay, let's switch to sellers. And so Scott, you said price is the big one, which makes a lot of sense that they're looking at how rapidly home prices were going up and they want to get what, their neighbor got. You still see home price gains. I think the last stat I saw from NAR is like 180 of the 195 metros they track are still showing price gains, and yet they expect that to kind of level off this year. But what are you talking about with sellers when it comes to price? If that's the big objection, Scott.
You want to make sure you're pricing in the market, not just on the market. So when you're pricing it competitively, and looking at comps that were 6 months ago, the market today is not the same market it was 6 months ago, and you might see somebody might have paid 20, 30,000 over market value at that time. So you got to really just dive in deep to see really where the market is. And it might only be going back 90 days compared to 6 months or 60 days in certain neighborhoods, just to get a real gauge on where things are, or going back a year and a half and going up, 4 to 6% on where the market was then to where it is today. So those are the type of conversations. And then also having clear expectations. If we don't have any offers within the first 14 days, we're going to have to talk about, price adjustments and making sure you have those expectations up front and not having the expectation, 21 days talking about, hey, we need to do a price change without having that conversation at the listing appointment. So those conversations you should be having at all times now.
I like it. Scott, what would you add? Or Brendan, what would you add?
Yeah, so the only thing I would add is what Scott was saying is we're using AMA instead of CMA, active market analysis instead of comparative market analysis. When we're meeting with sellers, we're using all of the data, but what really matters right now to sellers is where do you stack up if we were to hit the market today versus the active competition? Are you in first position, second position, third position? Meaning when it comes to the overall value, if someone had $1 million or $500,000 to spend right now, where do you stack up? Because what your neighbor sold for 3 months ago is now irrelevant. It doesn't matter. We're going to use it as we're not going to ignore that, but it doesn't matter. The buyers decide the market value for your home. So we need to make sure that we're understanding their psychology and how they're looking at this, and where do you position yourself to create that kind of interest so you're not sitting on the market for 40 days. One of the things that we do, James, is we use data, and we have a very, very solid graph that shows the risk of listing your property for 7 days, 14 days, and how much you lose in sales price to, or list price to sales price ratio. If you're on the market here in the Front Range area for more than 42 days, you go from 100% in the first 7 days to 91.2% by the 42nd day. So if you think about $1 million listing, if we wait 42 days for a buyer to come to your home, you're going to lose over $90,000. Does that make sense? That's why pricing is so critical.
It's creating some urgency. I did it, and pricing it right from the beginning. I did a conversation with Terry Story. Just like these guys, Terry's an MREA. She's in Boca Raton, and she's making $1 million a year selling houses. And she walked us through how she's explaining price to her sellers right now. So you can watch that at jamesdshaw.com if you haven't seen it with Terry's Story. It's really good. Okay, you guys know your stuff, and you work to help your team know their stuff. Gary says, in Shift, we've got to understand kind of the data of the market, but then we also have to be able to persuade our buyers and sellers to believe that what we're sharing with them is accurate. You've practiced. So what advice would you give to agents? Scott, I'll start with you. What advice would you give to agents about how to, grow their skill set so they can be like you and Brendan?
So like Brendan was saying, so we're not a part of Zillow Flex or anything either. We've always been prospecting based, marketing enhanced, and then now we're database driven on a lot of our business. Yeah, when agents come into our organization, we still have them focus on the for sale by owners. The expireds have been picking up like crazy January and February. So, focusing back on the expired listings and absentee calls, calling people with portfolios and building those relationships. And then on the buyer side, we bring in our buyers for a buyer consultation or do it on Zoom. And we have a PowerPoint presentation that just goes over everything. It takes about 30 minutes to go over. Yeah, making sure you're a professional in this business, because you want to treat the business, because this is the biggest investment they're making. So you want to make sure that when they come in, you have a lender there as well to answer any finance questions, and you just go over everything at that initial conversation. So that way, like they were talking about earlier, having that needs analysis, you're going over that there as well. And so those are things that are important. Yeah, getting back to the basics when it comes to scripts, having script practice time. We do that from 9 to 9:30 with our team, and then just focusing on that.
Brendan, how important is practice?
Oh my gosh, you know me, James. If I've said it once, I've said it 1 billion times. Is people always ask, why have you had success? I go, I've just practiced probably more than others. And so just like Scott, ours is from 10:30 to 11 every day, 5 days a week. We have 5 different subjects that we go through. So we have everything from how to set appointments to the negotiations of inspection objections. We're watching people lose deals here all the time, James, because they don't know what to say when they get an inspection objection that's maybe not perfect or whatever it is. Then we've got every day scheduled so you can learn something new, because you have to sharpen your blade and maybe learn something new, but you've got to practice this so that when the time comes and you're in the field and you're sitting across from that $2 million seller and they say, I want to hold off and interview 2 more agents, you immediately fire with exactly what you need to do to leave that appointment with a signature. And it's in that moment that you can make 50 grand, 100 grand, or walk away with nothing. And so it's just looking at like an elite athlete, what level are you going to play at? What level are you going to practice at? And I think, James, the biggest thing that I keep telling everyone is when you watch I know we're just coming off the Super Bowl, they all talk about how excited they were to play the game. to play the hardest that they could possibly play. They never said once, I've got to go work in the Super Bowl. So why don't we think about it the same way? How hard are we going to play in this game of real estate? And are we going to go to a Super Bowl? Or are we just going to wake up every day and go, oh, role play is work and it's hard? Come on. How do you want to play?
I love it. It reminds me of my favorite Super Bowl, which was when the Colts won, because I'm from Indy and I'm a Colts fan. And in that Super Bowl, they beat the Bears. And a guy named Kelvin Hayden intercepted a Rex Grossman pass, because he's horrible, and returned it for a touchdown. And in that, I remember all the defensive players got around him after he returned the touchdown. And they were going like this, like counting money. And at the end of the game, they interviewed him, like, what was going on? And Kelvin Hayden said, they just reminded me that I'd been paid for that already. That all of the practice and all the work we had done had just paid off. And I had an interception return for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So you're exactly right. And then you brought up, what you brought up was my favorite bold law. My favorite bold law is spontaneity is a conditioned reflex. And that is, look, the practice that you put in every day, so that when you do sit in front of that person who throws you an objection, without hesitation, you can respond in the right way or ask the right question to move the deal forward. So great stuff. All right, let's wrap up with this. Give the pro tip. What's the one pro tip, Brendan, that we've got to give somebody to make sure that they're ready for this skill-based market?
Yeah, so the pro tip would be to memorize and internalize. So the easiest pro tip that I can say is, whatever script book you're following, first get a script book. You got to get objection handlers. Then once you start listening to them, record yourself with your voice memo on your phone, record it in your own voice, and play it over and over again in the car. You have to brainwash yourself to understand this. You're not going to wake up and just have these very smooth one-liners and all that. You've got to constantly, be feeding your brain with the information so that it just becomes second nature. And then if you still can't do that, and if you're not an audible person, write down your scripts and dialogues. Every time you can't recite it all the way out, write it down 5 times. You just have to get it in here. And so when that time comes, you hit your Rolodex and go, boom, 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 and you drop it on them. And it's like breathing. So that's how I would say right now is the pro tip, to just be ready for when the time comes, but you got to hear it over and over again.
Scott, what's your pro tip?
So there's a book called Exactly What to Say. That book is phenomenal. It came out about 3 years ago. Yet that book, it's like bold in a book. So if you listen to it as far as words and how tie downs work and objection handlers, it helps you understand why you say what you say, and in certain words not to say, because of the thought process people hear when they hear a word that just causes negativity. When you think of practicing and scripting, think of your goal is to become like a Tom Hanks. If you think of Tom Hanks and how he practices his scripts, who he was in Forrest Gump and who he was in Castaway and who he was in Apollo 13 and who he was in Toy Story, he was able to master the script and become that character in each and every role he played. And a lot of us, I've heard agents in the past are like, well, I said, when are you gonna have that script memorized by? And it's like, well, give me about a month. It's like a month. Well, Tom Hanks, he did movies. You think that they said, okay, you're going to learn this script for this part, it's going to take a month? You need to become a professional in what you do. And that's by working each and every day to master your craft. And then remember, this is a relational business, not a transactional business. So once you're able to get, with the clients, become relational and get to really know them and come from a genuine place. And that's the importance in this business.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, think about it. Whatever your favorite show is that you watch on Netflix or whatever, man, they're cranking out an episode like every 5 to 8 days. So you've got to go learn everything in a quick amount of time. You don't have a month. You just go learn it and figure it out and get after it. Great stuff. Gentlemen, thank
James,
you. Go ahead, Brendan. Yeah.
Well, James, so what he's saying there exactly is right, is once you memorize what to say, then you can think about what they're saying. So you're not having to think about what you're going to say. So you can be in relationship, right? Like if you're sitting here thinking about and nervous what you're going to say, it's hard to actually listen to them because you're worried you're going to screw up. So yeah, I think exactly what Scott said. It's practice. You got to practice.
Here's the deal. When you practice what you're going to say, then actually you can make the appointment about them and not about you, because you're not worried about what you're going to say next. You just listen and you have a conversation and we get in the flow with each other and opportunity shows up. Look, listen to these two. They're both well in the millions of dollars in commissions a year. They're elite level agents running elite level businesses, and they just mapped out the plan for you. So don't fight it. Don't fight it, and take some of the strategies and win. Guys, thanks for joining us, and everyone, thanks for watching. I appreciate you. We'll see you on Pivot Shift Ahead. Have a good one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.